Hello, everyone, and good evening from West Orange. I am Anagarika Drew, and tonight we'll be receiving a sit and a Dhamma talk from our abbess, Ayyā Somā. But first, let's say hello to some friends here. Hello, Ron. Hello, Adine from sunny Portland, and hello back to you from dusk, West Orange. Hello, Melinda. Hello, Jens, Kumu, Denise, Mary, Gita. Hello, hello. And of course, hello, Ayya Vimalanyani. And that's enough of hellos, I guess. And I'll send it on over to Ayyā Somā.
All right. Thank you, Anagarika Drew, and thank you all for joining this evening. So we can get in a comfortable position, making sure our back is upright. And rocking body side to side. And when we feel that we found a somewhat comfortable position, there is no such thing as a comfortable position, as Bhante Sudazo reminds us very often. But comfortable enough is okay. And we can close our eyes and take a few deep breaths. And relax any tension that we might be experiencing in the body. Any tightness. We can relax the entire body from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. And then slowly and gently bring the attention to the breath. Anchoring it to the tip of the nose if that is helpful. Or leaving it a little bit more open and loose. Making sure that the important thing is we're present with our breathing. With each in-breath and out-breath. We are aware when we're breathing in, and we're aware when we're breathing out. If our breathing is shallow or coarse, long or short, we're aware in every single moment without forcing the breath to be different than what it is. We just observe it for what it's like. If we get distracted, thoughts appear in the mind, we can gently tell ourselves, not right now, and bring the attention back to the breath, nurturing deep curiosity towards the process of breathing that we're hardly ever aware of, hardly ever paying attention to, but something that we're constantly doing. Noticing also the aspects of tranquility and calmness that breathing produces in the mind whenever we pay attention to it. And actively cultivating that element of tranquility with the power of awareness. And as we keep cultivating awareness of the breath, the mind becomes more and more peaceful. And the more the mind becomes calm and peaceful, the more it becomes happy. So we can reflect how this happiness is always accessible to us. If only we put the right conditions in place. And we can wish for ourselves to always be happy, always be peaceful, always be calm. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. Remembering to keep a smile on our face, generating loving kindness for ourselves, really wishing for ourselves, really meaning it. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May I swiftly attain blissful nibbana. For the benefit of myself and others. And we can extend this wish to all the humans and non-humans sharing the same room with us tonight, or watching online and practicing together with us. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we be safe. May we be free from suffering. May we be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May we attain supreme blissful Nibbana. And we can keep growing and nurturing our metta, nurturing our loving kindness, filling up our entire heart. And extending this wish to all beings in this world and other worlds. Beings with bodies and beings without bodies. Beings in this universe and in other universes. Without exception, may all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings have happy minds. Without any greed, hatred, or delusion. Completely free from suffering. May all beings swiftly attain Nibbana. And we can slowly open our eyes and come out of meditation practice. And we can stretch our legs if we need to, or drink some water, while keeping our mind with metta.
Sadhu Ayya, and thank you for that meditation. And hello to Amaranta, as well as Linda. Good evening. Hello, Kevin. And Vortex 2177. Hello. Angela and Adriana. Welcome. Bienvenidos. So, tonight, Ayyā Somā will be sharing with us a talk on shame and guilt, which I would not deter from by speaking longer.
All right. Thank you, Anagarika Drew, and thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham namam sangam namasami. For our evening puja at Empty Cloud Monastery, we chanted the fire sermon. And as I was chanting, I was feeling everything on fire, as the Buddha encourages us to reflect, to contemplate. And, you know, I remember the first time I encountered the teachings of the fire sermon, and I was like, okay, that's bizarre. The ear is on fire, the nose is on fire, the tongue is on fire, the body's on fire. It's like, doesn't seem like that. Seems pretty all right. But it's so interesting. With practice, the more we dispel delusion, the more we realize that everything is on fire. And it was the whole day that I was trying to practice metta, and I was getting irritated actually because I was putting more fire on the fire because I was not capable of doing metta until this evening. So now my mind is finally cooled off a little bit. That fresh, kind of cold shower in the middle of August. This is how it feels after we need, after we take the medicine that we need, but we're also capable of finding the medicine to begin with. So much gratitude and so much awe for the Buddha, our teacher. But at the same time, it was actually this reflection before the talk was that, I mean, it's still actually happening in my mind as I'm speaking. It's very interesting in terms of the subject matter of tonight, of shame and guilt. and how we're relating to these words, and how when we encounter them in the suttas, how do we understand them? And it's interesting because the Buddha actually talks about it talks about Hirī-Ottapa, actually. Those are the Pali words that he uses rather than English words. And he talks about Hirī-Ottapa as the pillars that protect the world. So something extremely wholesome. They're also mentioned as powers, some of the powers that we cultivate and practice that help us and propel us towards awakening. And they're in the good company of faith, for example, and of energy and of wisdom. So in English, it's kind of interesting, right, that you have words like faith, energy, and wisdom, and then moral dread and moral shame. This is how they're usually translated, Hirī-Ottapa. But the Buddha also says how these qualities are not afflictive, but lead to happiness. And when we think about ourselves, like for example, this day where it was so difficult for me to practice metta, apparently it's one of the sort of basic meditation. You go to any meditation center in the city, they teach metta, and apparently people have a really good time with metta and easy time too. So a lot of being a monastic, there can be so many things involved with that sort of idea, like, wow, even the person that has never meditated or even read a sutta seems to be able to access to practice metta meditation. And I've been struggling the entire day, and I wasn't even able to do it for a second. I'm such a bad practitioner. Should be ashamed of myself, and I even have to talk tonight. I don't know anything. I should shut up, right? So we can get very easily in that tunnel of creating all these unwholesome mind states, or reflecting on our conduct and thinking, oh, what have I done this morning? Perhaps I spent good time ranting about this and that, and lots of fire in the mind. So then I was so annoyed with the fire that was in the mind. So then I decided to throw fire around me. So then everything was on fire. Not only, my experience, but also the experience of others around me. What a bad practitioner. That is awful. You're never going to attain enlightenment that way, right? So we can start with this course of conversation. So then getting back to the teachings of the Buddha, we're like, how can this be helpful towards the path? How can this be in association with wisdom? How can this be in association with, energy? Well, there's definitely perhaps a good degree of energy there, and put a lot of effort in practicing our defilements, but that's clearly not the energy that the Buddha is talking about. And also, how is this, in relation to faith? Is this increasing the faith or decreasing the faith? Well, actually, most often than not, if we start in that course, if we keep on going in that direction of shaming ourselves and producing all these sense of inferiority, most likely our actually faith in the most precious thing, in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, will start wavering, will start, not being that solid base that will propel our practice. So all of this, makes me think that perhaps what we should really question is, what are we talking about? Or better, what is the Buddha talking about when he's talking about Hirī-Ottapa? And what kind of meanings are we bringing to the table? And being a foreigner in the United States, well, technically I'm not a foreigner anymore, but that's kind of more a legal sort of status rather than, it's paperwork. But there's still like a cultural difference. I'm from Italy, different continent, speak a different language. The majority of the number one religion in this country, so the majority of people, the thing that is practiced the most is, yes, Christianity, like in my country, but a different flavor of Christianity. So Protestantism versus Catholicism. And we've had, even at the monastery, lots of different conversations about Hirī-Ottapa and how we relate to these words of shame and dread. It's funny because also English is not my first language, so shame and dread are just like words really that I started using or learning with the Dhamma. So at the very beginning, I was very much neutral to them. It's like, all right, that's moral dread and moral shame. But then I was translating them in Italian in my mind, and I was like, vergogna or senso di colpa. I was like, that's very weird and bizarre to relate to it in a wholesome way. But also it was very interesting how in these conversations I was noticing that people who were coming from perhaps a Protestant background were then going, well, actually maybe shame is sort of dirty word. It's not the exact right translation for Hirī-Ottapa. Maybe we could use guilt. And I was like, guilt? That's horrible. Definitely not guilt. We have the original sin in Catholicism, and it's something that I realized people who are born in Catholic countries, as well as Jewish people, apparently, we suffer from this. When they baptize us, they sprinkle this Catholic guilt that even if you have a secular bringing, you'll start spending decades feeling like you've done something bad. But getting back to, the Buddhist meaning of this, I was somewhat reflecting this afternoon on why, for example, certain cultures and people gravitate towards guilt or towards shame or towards neither, or how we're relating to this. And how, with Buddhism, not in Buddhism, but rather how we bring a lot of ourself into Buddhism. And how the Buddha talks about relating with Hirī-Ottapa is through deeds of body, speech, and mind. And so the reflection and the emphasis, it's hardly ever, if ever at all, on the individual. But it's always on the action, whether the action is wholesome, unwholesome, whether it's beneficial, unbeneficial, and where it's leading towards, what are the consequences. But when we talk about shame and guilt, it's always about ourselves whenever we're not relating to it in a Buddhist sort of way, but rather with our cultural baggage. So perhaps, as I was sharing in, if you have a kind of Christian Catholic upbringing, there is this concept of original sin, something that you're born with that is impossible to get rid of, or at least there are no instructions to get rid of. It's more like deal with it. Here is this terrible present. You're flawed. That's it. And by the way, everyone else is flawed too. Really bad news. No good news. And it's not that terrible. Not that different from the way that people are relating to shame in sort of Protestant background. So what is it creating? How are we experiencing this shame? As we were saying earlier, perhaps as not being good enough practitioners, not good enough Buddhists, not good enough monks, not good enough lay people, not good enough mothers, daughters, sons, you name it, partners, companions, teachers. So something that is truly who we are, that is irremovable, that wants us to make us, somewhat hide away from the world. It characterizes us so much that we're not worthy of being loved. We're not worthy of being cherished. It's something that we want to hide from the world. Perhaps it's another identity that we're hiding behind, this identity of shame. We're afraid of what other people are going to think about us because we're such bad people. And so once again, when we think about this, when we reflect on this, we see that it has to do with our identification with the action or with the idea that society gives us of that action or identity. But ultimately, it has to do with us saying, this is who I am. But as we were saying, the Buddha instead invites us to reflect on our actions in every single moment. And looking at where are these actions leading us towards? Are they leading us towards awakening, or are they not leading us towards awakening? And the essence, basically, of this approach is fundamentally to, if we've done, for example, something wrong, to acknowledge that we've done something wrong and then commit not to do it again. Commit to the wholesome. So I wanted to share a little sutta quote that I have. So with more enlightened words, straight out of the Buddha, from Samyutta Nikaya 42.9, we see how the Buddha talks, for example, about us breaking the precept of telling lies. And so the Buddha says, talks about a practitioner after breaking the precept. The practitioner says, he reflects thus: in many ways, the Blessed One criticizes and censors false speech, and he says, abstain from false speech. Now I have spoken falsehood to such and such an extent. That wasn't proper. That wasn't good. But though I feel regret over this, that evil deed of mine cannot be undone. Having reflected thus, the practitioner abandons false speech and abstains from false speech in the future. Thus there comes about the abandoning of that evil deed. And before, in this same sutta actually, the Buddha was in a conversation with a different sect, I think you say in English, right? Is that correct? That was actually a proponent of saying once you do something wrong, that you're basically going to go to hell. So I see you all, you've all done bad things, you're all going straight to hell. Half of you are going straight to hell, and the other half most likely too. And the Buddha is talking to these practitioners, and he's saying, well, actually, if you think this action is leading you to hell, well, most of the time, actually, you're not doing that action. So does it mean that you're going to go to heaven? Or what is the relation to it? And he highlights in that sutta that fundamentally it's if if we keep on thinking that that action will lead us to hell, then it will actually lead us to hell. But instead, he says, he recommends basically the approach that I just read. So fundamentally, acknowledging the unwholesomeness of that single action and reflecting how what has been done has been done. So we can't change the past. But what we can do is change what we're doing right now. So not repeating the action that we've done in the past, but committing to the wholesome each time. And he says, in fact, for it is growth in the noble one's discipline that once he's one transgression as a transgression, make amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma and undertakes future restraint. So it's a very simple but so brilliant, incredible system that the Buddha has put in place for us out of compassion. Understanding that it is obvious that as unenlightened beings, as humans who have done both incredibly harmful actions in the past and both incredibly wholesome actions in the past, which is why we have a human rebirth, mix of both worlds, of hell and heaven, that of course we have tendencies of mind. Of course we have that propensity towards making the same mistake again. But we do the same mistake again if we don't acknowledge that that is not who we are, that is just a bad habit, or it's just like a broken, broken piece of cloth that we put on. We can mend it. We have the ability to do it. But if we think it's who we are, then we're just going to see it opening up and falling apart. We don't feel like we have any sort of agency towards it. But it's something instead that the Buddha tells us and encourages us to take ownership of, not as a form of identity, but ownership in terms of actions. So we can't do anything anymore once we've done something. We can only reap the consequences. As I always like to quote Venerable Dreamy, we cannot control the consequences, but we can control the causes. That is one of the biggest gifts of the Dhamma. The empowering gift of the Buddhist teachings, telling us that in every single moment we can actually make a different choice. No matter how hard that is. You fail multiple times at generating a mind of loving kindness. Well, that's impermanent too. At a certain point, you will be able to do it. Great. That feels good. Wonderful. Yes, I commit to cultivating and growing and nourishing the mind of loving kindness and extinguishing the fire over and over again. We do also what is hard to do. But instead, if we get into, the habit of regret, of nurturing regret rather than nurturing wholesome actions, what we're doing is basically fueling papancha, which will make us confused in the present and confused in the future till we die. And then that will be, for the benefit of no one, either ourselves or others. But getting back to, why all these different translators then have chosen shame and dread as a sort of wording for Hirī-Ottapa. I asked myself this question. I was like, is there a better answer? And Bhante Sudazo actually has found the answer that he feels comfortable with, which is conscience and
consideration.
Conscience and consideration. Thank you, Bhante. Which I think is a good actually pointer. It gives a good sort of direction of what we have to cultivate. But, being a little bit fiery or Italian, I need a little bit more poking. So I kind of like also the potency of shame and dread. Conscience and consideration, I feel like it's a little bit soft, at least for my temperament. Or I would approach it with, oh, okay, yeah, I think I am conscientious enough, and I have consideration enough. Maybe I can work on it, but it's not that much of a sense of urgency. But shame and dread, whoa. Very strong words, aren't they? And it's interesting because I don't speak Thai, but in a lot of the biographies of the famous masters, they tend to use these words as well. So I don't know if it's because the disciples that were, the translator decided to use that particular choice of word, or how it is actually rendered in Thai. But I wanted to share with you a quote from Ajahn Mun, who says, if we train this mind to have a sense of shame and the fear of wrongdoing, we will then be restrained. We will be cautious. And then actually in this message too, we see that there's also some other words that normally we have, especially for lay people, perhaps we can have some resistance towards it. Definitely restrain, I don't know. Let go sounds more pop culture-ish. Like, oh yeah, let go. That's nice. Oh, let go of it. But restrain, renunciation, these are all heavy charged words. We like it a little bit less. There seems like there's a lack of liberty in there, right? And cautious, perhaps a little bit boring, isn't it? But actually it's delicious. It's so beautiful. The more we restrain ourselves, the more we let go of things, which is actually a synonym. There's no difference. The more we let go of our little liberties, the more we constrain ourselves, the more freedom actually we find. It's so paradoxical. And also the more actually this sense of shame and dread, for lack of better words, appears in the mind, but with a wholesome connotation. I remember the first time I took the 5 precepts and I started really practicing with them. I had a really awful habit of killing all sorts of insects. Prior to my Buddhist practice, I couldn't even see why. What was the purpose of insects in the world except for being disintegrated? It's as sad as it sounds. Like there was no compassion in my mind for anything that was small. Definitely cockroaches. A nightmare. If I would see a cockroach and I was with someone, I would encourage them, close to forcing them to kill the cockroach. One of my former partners probably had, cultivated this in past lifetimes, would always bring the insects out. And I would get so angry because they were bringing the insect out without killing the insect. So I took these precepts. And then we started a retreat center shortly thereafter, and there was an ant infestation. And I remember I was so angry, both at the ants and at the precept that was impeding me from killing all these insects that I was perceiving, ruining my life, destroying every single day, because these ants really liked whatever we were offering on retreat. Even though we had no sugar, at a certain point, there was no sugar anywhere. Everything was sealed. They started getting into the shampoo. Apparently, some shampoos have like some sweetener flavor in it. You name it. There's like so many weird things. So there was constantly, because we couldn't kill them, it was not only like, letting them be, but actually removing them carefully. It's difficult being a Buddhist, you have to spend a lot of time. It's not only refraining once again from killing, but also refraining from harming them altogether. So making sure that they're in a safe place. So at the very beginning, I was like, this is so stupid. My life was so much better before I took the precepts. I would have just gotten rid of all these ants and not having to deal with it. And dukkha, 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 dukkha. But interestingly enough, the more you train yourself this way, the more you restrain the mind this way, the more you start looking at the world with different eyes. So I remember fast forwarding it took a while, but 1 or 2 years later, they were our favorite roommates. After a while, the ants, they lived in the walls. And I remember at a certain point, I was washing my hands in the sink, and I see an ant that was about to drown. And my instinct was immediately to take the ant and bring her to safety. There was not one single thought in my mind of, bloody ant, why did you have to get into the sink right now and disturb my afternoon? Or, I remember panatipata viramani, or whatever it is. But rather, there was an immediate mind of compassion there, and no suffering. It was a miracle right there of compassion. And I remember thinking, wow, it's actually not a bad place to be here, like in my mind. I had never experienced this release from suffering, this peace that I had never experienced killing all those sentient beings in the past who were annoying me. So it's incredible how then now the thought of injuring any sentient being is unthinkable. I spent some time, I remember a while back, with some relatives who are not Buddhist practitioners, and we had that sort of killing insects in common. And it was the summer, I remember, and they were being attacked by all these mosquitoes, and I was like, pop, pop, pop. And I was horrified, not at them as relatives, but I was horrified by the action. And I remember thinking, how is it possible that they're killing all these poor ants? And I was, being like bitten as well at the same time. But then I remembered that mind. But this sort of shame and dread, once again, for lack of better words to define it, was seeing how terrible that action is, how harmful, and dreading to be close to doing that action yourself. So you can see how that creates a safety, towards so many sentient beings. There's so many cute little creatures that start living in monasteries. apparently the word has spread out. We had 2 deer last year. Now this winter we had like 16 or so. I want to see now in the spring and summer, they just keep multiplying because the word spreads. Animals are very sensitive to this aura of safety, and they're like, oh, it's okay to be in there. It's fine. And it becomes unthinkable once again when you are without other Buddhist practitioners to commit unwholesome actions of that kind. So we see how these are, in fact, pillars that protect ourselves, protect our mind, and protect others. There's something beautiful to be nourished, to be cultivated. And it is a power that propels us towards practice, towards full awakening. But we see how important it is to train ourselves in the precepts, not taking them as some weird, odd, arbitrary rule that we're following that is inconvenient to our life, but actually as something that creates the conditions for us to, well, first understand that there's a problem to begin with in the mind, and then to remove those issues at the root. In essence, basically, this is why I decided to multiply the precepts as I move forward with Buddhist practice, because we see how what we think are constraints are actually vehicles for freedom. So even words, my invitation to you is even words like guilt and shame and dread, or however you want to name it. Sometimes perhaps we need to rewrite the definitions, or most importantly, rewrite how are we relating to them and how can these be beneficial. And if we don't understand them, the problem is not in the teachings of the Buddha, but rather it's in our understanding of the teachings of the Buddha. And so we see how Ajahn Mun's invitation is actually incredibly beautiful, to train this mind to have a sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing. So then we can be restrained and we can be cautious because we understand the importance. Instead of walking, for example, all over the place and killing a bunch of ants, if we know that we have tons of ants as roommates, we're going to pay attention. You're going to see, like, how can we not harm? We start understanding that just like we do not want to be harmed, also others don't want to be harmed. Also others don't want to suffer. And so it creates automatically this, as a product, compassion to arise in the mind. One of the most compassionate things the Buddha has done is not to tell us to be compassionate straight away, but rather to tell us not to harm. Because only by non-harming we can access compassion. It's impossible to have compassion like that for people for ants who are like the kind of the most harmless insect sentient being in the world, really, aside from getting into your honey and apparently the shampoo. They really don't do much, yet our mind can go straight into killing the sentient being because they're just a nuisance, right? So it's a reflection, though. How are we relating to everything? Everything is a nuisance. Oh, if only I didn't have to deal with this. Oh, that's horrible. That's terrible. Everything is on fire. And so we think we need to do something, but sometimes we need to not do something. in order to be able to produce a wholesome mind state, in order to be able to help ourselves and others. All right, so I think that's all that comes to mind for now. And if anyone has any comments, you're welcome to write them in the live chat.
Namayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase
Sadhu, 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 anumodhami. Sadhu, Ayya, thank you. And do have a few comments and questions here.
Great.
Adriana's following along the whole time, giving you beat for beat here. That's so relatable. Yes, the Catholic guilt is real. Really loved the sutta. Someone actually asked what the name of the sutta was, if you recall.
I do not remember the name of the sutta, but if you send us an email, we can send you the link.
You heard it here first. All right. So Kumu and actually Ron both have a comment in regards to guilt. Kumu says, I had to do an insect collection for an entomology course, kill them, identify, etc. I still have that guilt. And Ron says, same here.
Yeah, and we, well, not we, but the Buddha. Once again, recollecting always the Dhamma whenever we see ourselves repeating the same habit. And so how the Buddha suggested for us not to repeat that unskillful behavior of going back and digging everything unskillful we've done in the past. It's a really full-time job and it's unpaid. So let's toss it out. It just creates new conditions, actually, for us, paradoxically, to repeat the same mistake. So what we need to do is acknowledge it, confess it to someone else. So talk about it with someone else once. It's good enough. That's it. Not like for hours and hours and therapy sessions, very expensive. I've done this, I've done this. That's it. I commit not to repeat it again. And if you have a problem redoing the action, then you ask for help to other practitioners and say, okay, I have a really bad habit. I can't do it by myself. Please help me. So the commitment should always be in what are we doing next rather than what we have done in the past. What we have done in the past should only give us some information of our inclinations of mind.
All right. The question from Adine, who says, isn't judgment a two-edged sword, the basis for both guilt and committing ourselves to doing better?
Yeah, in fact, we want to aim at a non-judgment day. So, yeah, it depends on, once again, all of these words that we use. It really depends on the definition that we're using. So there's a difference between judging with that sort of like, oh, bad you, bad you, bad you, and there's a different non-judgment, which is acknowledgement, perhaps. Maybe we can use that word. So understanding, it's kind of like saying, this clock is black. So it's not white, it's black. It's not pink, it's black. So I'm understanding what it is, but I don't feel strongly about it. I'm not like, it's not pink or it's not yellow or whatever I want it to be, but rather I acknowledge it's black. Or I also don't go like, oh my God, it is black. Thank God it's not pink. I hate pink, right? We just assess that this is black. And so if we need a pink clock, then we make it pink. Or if we see that it's black and we need a black clock, we keep on going up. We're like, okay, this is great that I have a black clock. Do you see what I mean? So in the same way, we should relate to our actions, understanding fully, skillfully what they are, not pretending that they're not there, because that's what creates the conditions for then guilt to happen. So if we're like, if you kill sentient beings, actually, to get to back to the example of the ants, within those 1 or 2 years of transition from pure hatred of ants to I love you ants, there was also a lot of unskillful behavior that I had to acknowledge, catch myself in it, and dismiss it. So for example, if the ant was in the sink, then I would turn my head the other direction if I was too lazy to remove it. And I'm like, oops. Oh, I think the ant drowned. Oops. But well, I didn't harm it, like it just kind of went through the pipes by itself. I didn't harm the ant. So then at a certain point I was like, okay, who are you kidding? I wasn't ordained yet, but so it was, Giovanna, come on. What are you doing? That is harming, or it is a deliberate non-action that has a clear consequence. So we really have to be honest with ourselves and assess the situation. So that was an unskillful action. And that's how I assessed it in the past. And so then I committed to do better. Did I then repeat the action? Yes, of course I did. Within that lapse of time, I did repeat it. And then I was like, oopsie, I did it again. I commit not to do it again. And so the more you practice this way, then at a certain point, you actually don't do it again. Isn't it incredible? Also in my self-bashing, for example, because I'm a dosa type and I'm not proud of it. But there are these mental states that, that start obsessing the mind, and it seems like there's no progress. And we're like, oh, wow, everything is irritating and terrible. But then there's also the self-reflection. Actually, it's really not that bad, but why does it feel so terrible? But then you have to step even further away and go, well, I've been practicing now for several years. Wow, actually, I remember that mind. For example, when I used to kill ants, that had a lot more anger and irritation. It's not even comparable to actually in comparison now, my mind is peaceful and sweet and full of loving kindness. Just that I'm a hate type, so I hate it because it's not perfect. But if we can be realistic, so recollect our own goodness, acknowledge our progress, see that we are capable of being good people, that not all the time we're horrible people. But also not pretend that we're like great people all the time, Like be realistic about it. Go, okay, this was skillful, this was unskillful. Let me get rid of the unskillful and let me cultivate the skillful. And then we're practicing the teachings of the Buddha and we're releasing suffering. And people find us a lot more pleasant to be around with. I apologize to all my co-practitioners here at the monastery for dealing with my dosas.
So Adine also asks another question. So we need to ditch the emotional reactivity linked to judgment, right?
That's very sophisticated English. So let me Can you repeat it again? I am ESL, so you have to like bit with a little bit. Emotional reactivity
linked to judgment.
Emotional reactivity linked to, we have two, what was before the emotional reactivity?
So we want to get rid of, want to ditch the
Oh,
emotion.
we want, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because then at the beginning you do the acknowledgement and then you get into, how do you say, il tribunale, like a whole trial. And yeah, it's really not fun and completely useless. And then you start thinking about in the past and like creating all these different, connections and movies. And that's how we are strengthening our self-identity. So our sense that we are that person, we are the angry person, we are the dosa type, we are the emotionally unstable, we are the killer, we are whoever we think we are. The more we repeat the story in ourselves, the more, of course, it becomes so entrenched with our experience that it's difficult to separate from it. And of course, then we are, fulfilling, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, that's so terrible, so I'm going to do it over and over again. So that will seriously be mean, undeniable.
Okay. And Adine posted the same question again, but in Italian, and I can't read Italian, so sorry, Adine. Yeah.
Well done, though. I appreciate the effort.
And
Drew, with that last name, you should know how to pronounce the Italian, eh?
Tis my shame, I suppose.
Italian last name. It's okay. Thank you.
All right. Adriana says, your stories make me remember what a huge feat it is just to observe the 5 precepts. So much uplift right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, pretty much almost, like, I would say 99% of the problems in the world could be solved with if people followed the 5 precepts. It's incredible how the Buddha, this is the genius of an enlightened being, how they're able to narrow it down, simplify the instructions so that they go right to the core of the issues. As Venerable Rabbi Kortin says, the Dhamma is so simple, it's embarrassing. In the way that it's embarrassing that we're not capable of practicing it, It's just so simple, though. But it's simple because it's created by an enlightened being. How incredible. What is relevant today that was relevant 2,500 years ago? Nothing, except for the Dhamma. We think we are such an advanced society. You can have so many deliriums of superiority because, I don't know, we have a Twitter account. But really, I mean, the way that the Buddha sees the world, it's just incredible. This is what fills my heart with faith, the Buddha mind. How he addresses every question with compassion and kindness and understanding, like, and wisdom, like understanding immediately what the problem is and what is the appropriate response to give to the, individual he's talking to. Something that then is relevant for us today, that is not particularly specific to India 2,500 years ago. How incredible is that? How incredible that anyone, regardless of their background, whether it's, race, age, gender, sex, like whatever it is, can practice these teachings. How incredible it is. It's fantastic.
All right. There are no more questions for this evening on YouTube anyway, but We might turn the camera, so to speak, at the audience. Any questions? I don't think so. So, just about time anyway, so we can wrap up. Thank you again, Ayya.
Thank you.
We'll end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everyone.